What is it, you back again with another video? Today's video, man, it's that time again. I know I haven't really made a video like this in a couple days since the last one, but it's because of Season 5. I've been kind of busy, but we're back here again with another video about my book, where we go into each chapter and we go into why, how, and what it's about, kind of going into every little detail. And so, without further ado, let's get into it. So, we're going into chapter 4 called No More Treaties. This chapter is going to focus a lot on treaties and the effects of it. And it's going to focus on a lot of the big battles that happened that kind of turn the tides against the Exil and bring a couple years of peace from, like a long period of time. So, we left off last chapters with the treaties and kind of just some world peace going on, and a lot of death with wars. But this chapter is going to pick up on some new stuff. So let's get into it. So the chapter starts off with describing the situation in the U.S. By the end of 2055, less than a couple of years after the events of chapter 3. The U.S. is on a winning streak, man. They're actually so much of a winning streak, they're actually taking back most, if not all, of the western United States. Places like California, Seattle, in Detroit, up that, that U shape of the U.S., that area of the border, are all being recaptured and re-secured. And also we see a lot of Mexican revolts happening in Mexico. And Mexico actually begins to win back a lot of their continent back from the invaders, the Exil forces. Less than a year later, pro-war groups. So if you remember from the time of when I was talking about, I think it was chapter 1, I was talking about a little bit about how the EDF will be disbanded in the events of chapter 2 and 3. And we'll see an increasing amount of pain and suffering between peoples of pro-war and anti-war groups. Well, things hit a climax during this period. So in 2056, pro-war group Sentinel launched a nuclear device at Paris, France. They kill over 10 million people within a few minutes. The nuke sparks a long period of just sadness in Europe at this time. It leaves half of France completely uninhabitable. And this is going to be a time period. This chapter is going to have 2 nuclear devices launched, one by Earth forces and one by Exil forces. And I wanted to stay away from nuclear devices so much because I feel like they're kind of cheesy in a way. Like, sure, the winning force or losing force is going to launch a nuclear device. Obviously. But it's more along the lines of, this shows the desperateness of civilization at this point. Because, yes, we are winning a lot of battles. We are, absolutely. Physical ground that we are winning is high. The Exil don't really have the resources to keep holding ground. So they usually use a large sum of forces, attack us hella hard, we'll push back, we might retreat, but then we'll launch a counter assault. But in that time, they didn't have the time or resources to resupply those men. So once their forces are dwindled, it's pretty easy to retake over the area. And so both sides are getting kind of desperate. But even though we're winning, we're also losing a lot. We're losing thousands upon thousands of men every single battle, at every single minute. With the nuke in Paris, it shakes up the way Paris believes in treaties. And as the chapter goes on, we're going to discuss more about the treaties. But in 2057, less than 1 year after the nuke in Paris, finally, the United States military, specifically the 5th and 8th Marine Corps, as well as with the remnants of the 32nd Airborne, were able to recapture DC after 2 years of constant fighting. It costed the United States around 20 million people. About 7 or 8 million civilians were killed, and the rest were military personnel. But to see something different happen. So the first time in the entire war, the Exil have a mass Earth retreat. Like, when I say retreat, they literally put their tails between their legs and they dart out off the planet. It's pretty known at this point they're living on other planets in our solar system. So we understand that they're not really retreating; they're more just pulling back their resources and reorganizing. But the Exil will lose a massive 500 million in the Battle of DC. It would be one of the largest losses for the Exil for the first 40 years of the war, almost. Some new religious figure pops up. I don't really go into it too much in chapter 4, but it's something I want to bring back. It's someone who I want to reintroduce later in the story. But he goes by the name Jacob, and he is a Christian religious cultist. So he's a extremist in the sense of he is a Christian, but he is very far extreme. And he believes that he is God's sent being to end the war himself. He believes that there will be that him and God will come and end the war. Pretty much is his ideology. He joins a pro-war group. He signs a contract, pretty much a form of a contract anyway, basically saying, "I'm going to fight for you guys, and you guys are going to fight for me." Then on April 2nd, 2059, after months of protests to reestablish the EDF is reformed. Is currently being run by a council. There will be a character that we'll be introducing at the end of this chapter who will go on a journey to become the new EDF High Command leader. And he will be really, really good leader. I will spoil that. I wrote the second leader to be way better, way more forgiving than the others. So the EDF is only formed for a mere day before Operation White Arrow is considered a go. Operation White Arrow was going to be this crazy experiment by the EDF and NASA and the UN, or whatever's left of the UN and NASA joined forces with the EDF to help with Operation White Arrow. Operation White Arrow was going to be this idea of going into other planets, and beginning colonization to try to help us. If we would happen to lose Earth, we would have a backup. Kind of like how you back up your device, right? You back up your data on your device. Same process. This idea of send small units, about 150 people, 25 SEAL team operatives. This would see a large spike in SEAL teams as well. This whole operation would see 47 additional SEAL teams be developed. Currently in the U.S. arsenal, I think there's only 7 SEAL teams, so that would be almost a 35% increase in SEAL teams overall being developed. But these units would be sent out, and they would scout the planet. They would see what they need resource-wise to develop it. Remember, Earth and humans are so much farther advanced than in this storyline they are in ours. Okay. At this point in our civilization, we have the ability to cure diseases that we don't even begin to believe we can cure these days, like cancer, and not hemorrhoids. What's that word? The dementia. That's the word I'm looking for. So things like dementia and cancer are all cured in this timeline. This universe, humans are far more advanced. We have more and more laser guns are more common. So this is something. Laser guns aren't necessarily on the ground forces. Things like M4 assault rifles, AK-47s are still very, very common. They're still the base weapon for most countries. But the U.S. government and the British government, before they were destroyed, were in the works of working on laser rifles and supercontinental ballistic missiles that could go out into other planets. Space agencies were very powerful during this period in the human history. I mean, these were guys that had created super conductors and all types of really interesting, cool things. But there's a problem with White Arrow. So you have to remember, this is still humans. We still have a civilization. So we still need things like money, food, water, healthcare, hospitals, schooling, colleges. These things are all still in somewhat necessity, right? And so money is a big problem. Throughout the war, it was okay. We weren't doing the best. But just like any other war, you don't really feel the money problems from a war until pretty much after the war is over. It's usually during the war, depending on the country, is usually pretty fine. It's usually something you have to worry about after. But this operation, because of the situation the plan it had, right, creating all these SEAL teams, building all these spaceships to head into space, it was going to be expensive. Actually, the most expensive project known to humankind, a humongous $39 trillion, being one of the biggest purchases, if not the biggest purchase, of all of human history at this point. And so they purchase it, and it throws the United States as well as some of the EDF allied countries into a second Great Depression, basically making the EDF dollar pretty much irrelevant at this point. And this would be a major nail in the coffin for a lot of situations on Earth. Due to this second Great Depression, things like hunger and hydration issues would all become widespread. Famine would become a huge problem, killing thousands, and it would be a disaster for a lot of the Western countries like the United States. It would take a year before finally the GMOs, which are basically, I don't know what the actual definition of GMOs is. I just know it's a chemical-based plant, pretty much, is the best way to explain it. It's doctored plants and doctored meat. A lot of people these days are against GMOs because GMOs can, I believe, affect your DNA depending on how they're developed. So they're not always the best thing. But again, this universe, GMOs would have been basically all but figured the fuck out relatively easy. So that wasn't really a concern at this point. Scientists in this universe were way farther ahead of their time. So, I mean, it was a little bit better. So with the GMOs being introduced in the population, food became more accessible. And then they were able to, the EDF now were focused on continuing Operation White Arrow. And White Arrow would be a success overall. Throughout the story, you're going to hear mentions of intergalactic societies that we form, and you're going to hear about battles that happen on Mars, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, but that's not yet. After White Arrow and the Second Depression, a lot of things kind of cooled down. The Exil had pretty much all but abandoned Earth for the current moment, and kind of gave America and the rest of the countries a breathing second. But that wouldn't last very long. Within a few months, the 33rd Air Fighters Squadron from the Exil 5th Battalion or 5th Corps show up, and these are going to be the very first officially known cloaked bombers and cloaked fighters. And these things wreak fucking havoc around the globe, especially the Western United States, because the Exil are really fucking pissed that they lost to Western United States, and they want some revenge. Places like even on the northeast coast, like Miami and Florida, California gets hit bad with the bombers, and so does Seattle, Washington, and so does Detroit. And things start to go kind of crazy with these bombers because they are cloaked. You can't see them with the naked eye. They're quiet, and they don't even show up on radars that much. They're relatively self-reliant, and they're, from what we understand, we haven't really captured any in the story up to this point, anyway. So it's unclear if they're manned or unmanned. So we don't know if they're AI, if there's a mothership controlling all of them, or if it's individual people or individual Exil controlling. But thankfully, the United States has been preparing for a disaster of this magnitude and they have been developing a new stealth fighter. Called the X-86 Long Range Intergalactic Fighter, and it's a beastie boy. It looks very similar to if you took an F-22 Raptor and then you kind of combined it with like the F-18 or F-16, kind of very, very similar. It's very weird looking, but it has the abilities to not only fight in space, but enter and exit the Earth, the Earth's atmosphere with ease, which proves very useful. But these are still new. They're untested. These are things that have just been developed by our scientists, and so there's a lot of worry with how they're going to work. We're limited on resources, so we don't want to waste humans. Physical resources like guns and all that, we can constantly develop. We can mine asteroids for more resources. Like, we're not concerned about that in the story, but the biggest concern is humans as a resource. And so they decide to develop the first 5 to 10 X-86s as AI controlled, or basically, artificial intelligence controlled. And they are sent to North Carolina to intercept the 20 or so coach bombers that have been kind of hanging around North Carolina for a couple months. They kept just kind of bombing, running away, coming back, bombing, running away, coming back, bombing, and kind of figured out that that's what they were kind of hanging around in that area. And the 5 X-86s perform extremely well. They had a new radar system built into them, which allowed them to pick up on the very, very, very small radiation waves left behind by the engines of the stealth bombers. And with this new ability, they were able to track the bombers, the 33rd bombers that were cloaked with pretty much ease. And the X-86s proved very well with destroying all 20 bombers and not losing a single X-86 in the process. This is a huge win for the U.S. They start mass production of X-80 wings. Within the first year of the development, over 500,000 X-86s are developed. And about half of those are manned, half of those are unmanned. You gotta keep resources under a minimum. By late 2059, all treaties have pretty much fallen apart with the Exil. And this really starts to piss off the Exil as a large. Remember, by this point, a lot of Earth is really sick of treaties, with the thousands upon thousands of murders in Exil slave camps, and the mass rape spreading like wildfire across Europe, as the Exil and the as well as captured humans get desperate for any type of power in their lives. France finally falls from the treaties, and the anti-war group is pretty much disbanded, as they pretty much failed in their mission. But it'll take some time for France to get their shit together. It'll take some time. And so in late 2059, early 2060, the Exil finally give enough of the Earth's shit, and they launch a nuclear device at Canada, pretty much shocking the entire Western world, pretty much. Mexico and the U.S. just watched in horror as a nuclear is dropped dead center in Toronto, Canada, causing serious deaths, and pretty much dismantling all of Canada, and causing mass hysteria. Canada will pretty much never recover from this, and Canada will pretty much become dependent upon the United States and how successful that country is in its war, pretty much. And then in late 2060, a guy named Adolf Park frees himself and his child from an Exil slave camp. I think I'm in the book around Belgium and France area, about somewhere around the center of Europe, and he must now begin his journey to the United States to, what he does not know yet, become the EDF High Command. And he will become a very popular man along his journey. And when he gets to the United States, he'll make some of the best speeches that we will ever hear in our lifetimes. And so he becomes very, very popular. And at the time of him leaving the slave camp, He's only 24 years old, which is a mind-blowing for this time period. So the average lifespan in this generation, in this in this story, is 22. 22 is the average life of a male as of 2070. So that's about 10 years after this. Anything older than 20, the amount of percentage of people over the age of 22 is less than 20% of the population. Under the age of 17 is about 70 to 80% of the population. And then the average fighting force, which is about the last like 7 or 8% of the population, is around 20 to 20, or sorry, 19 to 22. It is a very bad time period. Remember, it's harder for men to grow, right? Because year from your birthday to your next birthday is 365 days, and so what happens is a lot of these young men will be graduating from their high school or whatever education they have, if they even get any. There's a lot of, at this point, only major cities have any education in any way. And then we go immediately off to boot camp. You would have about 17 weeks of training, basically going over your weapons and how the Ixil fight. You will learn the weaponry of the Ixil, kind of, and then they would just throw you on the front lines. And you'd be shipped out to units that were already on the line. They would literally drop you in parachutes and say, find your teammates. Good luck. Because a lot of the battlefields at this point are huge cities, or huge trench lines across thousands of miles, and the logistics of that is a disaster. The U.S. and the EDF do a great job so far in the war. They do a lot of winning, but you can definitely feel within the story that there is some logistical issues that arise. But that's pretty much chapter 4, man. That's pretty much it. It's a very, I believe it's a very interesting chapter because it kind of goes into that whole idea of nuclear warfare. This is kind of the last time I kind of mentioned nuclear warfare for a while. I actually don't think I have written down anywhere in the story for nuclear war, but it is important to understand that that is a possible thing. The Ixil do not like to lose. They are, as we would call it on Earth, sore losers. And so the Earth, or humans in general, do believe that at the end of the war, whatever that may be, it will be certain death for everybody involved. And there's certain measures we're taking. So as of 2105, there'll be a new development begin where we're developing a new planet shield. So very sci-fi in that sense that it's going to be this giant like oval dome over the Earth to try to block it from any invaders. But that's still millennia off of being ready. But with that being said, guys, that's pretty much the end of the video, man. I hope you guys enjoyed this book video. I have another one planned soon. I have another COD video planned soon as well. I love y'all. You're one of a kind. You're beautiful. I will see you guys in the next video. Later.